1,000 motorcycles thundered down Maple Street as 11-year-old Zaria Jackson watched from her porch trembling. The police had already arrived, weapons drawn. Yesterday she had given 37 cents to a white stranger. Now her entire family might pay the ultimate price. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe small acts of kindness can change lives, and subscribe to hear more stories that will shake your understanding of our world. Now let's rewind to see how one young girl's compassion set off a chain reaction that nobody saw coming. Zaria Jackson lived in Westwood, a struggling, predominantly black neighborhood in Detroit that had seen better days. Cracked sidewalks lined streets, dotted with abandoned buildings, yet pride still showed in the carefully tended gardens and swept stoops. The Jackson home was modest, but meticulously maintained a small two-bedroom house with peeling blue paint that Zaria's grandmother Esther insisted on touching up every spring despite her arthritis. Inside, the furniture was worn, but clean family photos covering the walls like a patchwork quilt of memories. Zaria shared a room with her grandmother while her mother Denise took the smaller bedroom. Money was tight since Zaria's father Marcus had been imprisoned 3 years ago for a robbery he swore he didn't commit. The evidence had been circumstantial at best, but the all-white jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Since then, Denise worked double shifts as a licensed practical nurse at Detroit General Hospital, leaving before dawn and often returning long after Zaria was asleep. Grandmother Esther, a retired school cafeteria worker, kept the household running with strict budgeting and endless resourcefulness. Despite their financial struggles, Zaria never went hungry, though she noticed how her grandmother and mother often claimed they'd already eaten when portions ran low. Zaria's passion for collecting coins had begun the day her father was taken away. As officers led him out in handcuffs, he had pressed something into her palm, a 1,943 steel penny, a wartime rarity. "This is worth something, little star," he'd whispered. "Not just money, but history. People overlooked it because it wasn't flashy, but that doesn't make it less valuable." That penny became her talisman. And soon she began collecting other coins that people discarded or overlooked. She developed daily routines, checking beneath vending machines, scanning the ground near parking meters, and searching the fountain at the small shopping center where people tossed wishes away without realizing each cent mattered to someone. Like her. Her collection grew slowly but steadily stored in an old cigar box her grandmother had given her. Each coin was carefully counted, polished, and arranged. She kept a notebook tracking her finds, noting dates and places with the precision of a professional numismatist. At school, Zaria's interest in coins had recently led to trouble. Mrs. Caldwell, her fifth-grade teacher at Westwood Elementary, had accused her of stealing from the class donation jar, collecting money for field trip scholarships. "I saw you eyeing it, Mrs." Caldwell had said, her voice carrying across the classroom as students turned to stare. "And now $50 is missing. Empty your pockets and backpack right now." Zaria had complied, mortified, as classmates watched her turn out empty pockets. When no money appeared, Mrs. Caldwell wasn't satisfied. Principal's office. Now, the principal, Mr. Whitaker, had called her mother at work without investigating further. When Denise arrived still in her nursing scrubs after leaving her shift early, she found Zaria waiting outside the office fighting tears. "My daughter is not a thief," Denise had stated, firmly seated across from Mr. Whitaker's imposing desk. "She's been taught better than that." "Mrs. Jackson, we have a zero-tolerance policy for theft," the principal had replied with a condescending smile. "Perhaps if there were more structure at home." Denise had straightened in her chair. "My home has plenty of structure, Mr. Whitaker. What my daughter doesn't have is $50 to steal. What she does have is integrity, which I'm not sure I can say about an administration that accuses children without evidence." They left without an apology, though the next day it was discovered that Mrs. Caldwell had misplaced the donation jar in her desk drawer. The incident received no acknowledgement beyond a terse announcement that the missing funds have been located with no mention of Zaria's false accusation. That evening, Zaria had counted her coin collection with special reverence. 37 cents wasn't much by most standards, but to her each piece represented perseverance and patience. "Grandma," she'd asked as Esther folded laundry nearby, "why did Mrs. Caldwell think I took that money?" Esther had put down the towel she was folding and sat beside Zaria on the bed. "Some people look at our skin and see what they expect to see, not what's actually there." "That's not fair," Zaria had protested. "No, baby, it's not," Esther agreed, "but you come from a long line of strong people who kept their dignity when others tried to take it. Your great-grandfather built schools when they said black children didn't deserve education. Your grandmother, my mama, cleaned white folks' houses by day and studied nursing books by night until they had to let her take the exam. And you know what? She passed with higher marks than anyone that year." As Esther spoke, she gestured toward the neighborhood through the window. "This place is changing. Those fancy coffee shops and art galleries moving in down on Mercer Street aren't for us. 3 families on this block got notices last month saying their rent's doubling. That's not because the buildings suddenly got better." Zaria understood what her grandmother wasn't explicitly saying. Gentrification was pushing long-time residents out, and their family could be next. Denise was already working as many hours as humanly possible, coming home with dark circles under her eyes and hands raw from constant washing. They were barely making ends meet as it was. That night, after adding her day's find, a tarnished nickel from the school bus floor to her collection, Zaria had whispered to her father's penny, "I'll keep us safe somehow. I promise." The following day after school, Zaria took her usual route home, carefully avoiding the corner where Jason Whitaker, the principal's son, and his friends often waited to harass kids from her neighborhood. This alternate path meant walking past the abandoned Sunoco station, where people sometimes did things her grandmother warned her about. But Zaria figured occasional drug dealers were less dangerous than guaranteed bullies. The October afternoon was unseasonably warm, making her school uniform, a navy blue polo shirt, and khaki pants feel stifling. She'd loosened her mandatory braids into a ponytail against school regulations, knowing she'd fix them before reaching home where grandmother Esther would notice. The abandoned gas station came into view, its faded blue and yellow sign missing several letters. Usually, Zaria hurried past with her eyes forward, but today, something unusual caught her attention. A massive motorcycle, gleaming black with chrome details, stood next to one of the old pumps. Beside it, a large white man with a gray beard sat on the curb, his head in his hands. Zaria immediately slowed her pace, internal warnings flashing. Her mother and grandmother had been explicit about strange white men. Keep your distance, make no eye contact, and if they approach, run. But something about the man's posture spoke of defeat rather than threat. His shoulders slumped forward, and as she cautiously drew nearer, she could hear labored breathing. The man looked up, revealing a weathered face with deep lines surrounding pale blue eyes. He appeared to be in his 60s, with a large frame now bent in apparent distress. His black leather jacket was worn at the elbows, and a partially covered patch on the sleeve caught Zaria's attention. She couldn't see the full design, but the visible portion showed what looked like a skull with wings. The man noticed her staring and shifted position, wincing as he moved. "Hey there," he said, his voice gravelly but soft. "Don't suppose you know if there's a working payphone around here? My cell's dead." Zaria took 2 steps backward, maintaining distance. She'd been taught not to talk to strangers, especially not white men in empty lots. But curiosity won over caution. "Why do you need a phone?" she asked, ready to run if necessary. The man gestured to his motorcycle. Bike broke down. "Need to call someone." He paused, then added, "My daughter's having a baby today. First grandchild. Supposed to be there, but now." His voice trailed off. Zaria studied him carefully, noticing a small hospital visitor badge clipped to his jacket. Still, the skull patch concerned her. "What's that on your jacket?" she asked pointedly. The man glanced down at his sleeve and quickly adjusted it to cover the patch more completely. "Something from a long time ago," he answered, discomfort evident in his voice. "Not proud of it now." He looked up at her again. "Name's Victor Harrington. Been trying to get to Detroit General for 3 hours now." Bike started making noises on the freeway, barely made it this far. The mention of Detroit General, where her mother worked, gave Zaria pause. A coincidence or a lie to gain her trust, Victor continued, seemingly unaware of her suspicion. Tried the convenience store down the block. Clerk wouldn't let me use their phone, called security on me instead." He laughed bitterly. "Guess I look like trouble." Zaria remained silent, observing. Several cars had passed during their conversation, but none stopped drivers visibly accelerating when they spotted Victor. One woman had even locked her doors as she drove by. "Been sitting here watching people decide I'm dangerous without knowing a damn thing about me," Victor said more to himself than to Zaria. "Sorry for the language, kid." Something in his resigned acceptance of others' fear resonated with Zaria. Hadn't she experienced the same at school? People deciding who she was based on nothing but appearance? "Are you really going to see your daughter?" she finally asked. Victor nodded, pulling out a wallet and carefully extracting a sonogram image. "Alexandria, my only child. Hasn't spoken to me in years until last month. Said she wanted her baby to know their grandfather." His voice caught. "Took me a long time to deserve that second chance." Zaria's internal debate intensified. Her instincts, shaped by years of warnings, told her to leave immediately. The partially visible skull patch suggested connections to groups known for hatred toward people who looked like her. Yet Victor's distress seemed genuine, and the sonogram photo was worn around the edges as if frequently handled. "I just need to make one call," Victor said. "Got friends who'd come get me but can't reach them with a dead phone. Was hoping to find a payphone, but those are like dinosaurs these days." Zaria thought about her coin collection in her backpack. 37 cents wouldn't normally be enough for a payphone call, but it might help somehow. Decision made, she unzipped her backpack and extracted her cigar box, keeping a safe distance from Victor. "I have some coins," she offered cautiously. "Not much, but maybe enough for a phone call if you find one." Victor stared at her, clearly surprised by the offer. "You'd help me. After everyone else today crossed the street to avoid me." Zaria shrugged already, second-guessing her decision. "My grandma says judging people without knowing them is what's wrong with the world." She approached carefully, placing the cigar box on the ground between them before stepping back again. Victor picked up the box with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. Opening it, he saw the carefully arranged coins, including the steel penny, placed in a position of honor in its own small compartment. "This is your collection," he stated, not a question but a realization. "I can't take this, kid. It's only 37 cents, Zaria replied. "Not enough for much, but maybe a phone call." Victor looked from the coins to Zaria, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. Zaria hesitated before answering. "Zaria?" "Zaria Jackson." Victor carefully closed the box and held it out toward her. "Zaria Jackson, this means more than you know. But I can't take your collection." When she didn't move to retrieve it, he placed it on the ground between them again. "Tell you what. I'll borrow just what I need for a phone call, and somehow I'll make sure you get it back." Zaria nodded, her decision made. "Take it all. It's just coins." Before Victor could respond further, the sound of approaching sirens startled them both. Without thinking, Zaria grabbed her backpack and ran, leaving the cigar box behind. As she rounded the corner, she glanced back to see Victor watching her go the box of coins in his weathered hands, a strange expression on his face that she couldn't decipher. The moment Zaria closed the front door behind her, she regretted leaving her coin collection with the stranger. What had she been thinking? Giving her precious coins, including her father's special penny, to a white man with a suspicious patch on his jacket. The wailing sirens had triggered an automatic flight response. But now, in the safety of home, doubt crept in like a shadow. Would Victor really use the money for a phone call? Or had she been naive, taken in by a story designed to manipulate her? Worse, she had told him her full name. Grandmother Esther was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the familiar scent of collard greens and cornbread filling the small house. "That you baby girl," she called. "Come help with these potatoes." Zaria dropped her backpack in her room before joining her grandmother, careful to maintain a neutral expression that wouldn't invite questions. As they worked side by side, the radio played softly in the background, interrupted by a news bulletin that caught Zaria's attention. "Police have increased patrols in the Westwood area following reports of suspicious individuals. Residents are advised to remain vigilant as authorities work to clear undesirable elements from neighborhoods slated for redevelopment. Esther clicked her tongue disapprovingly. That's code for running black folks out to make way for those expensive condos they're building. Your mother said 3 more families from her church got eviction notices this week. Zaria silently peeled potatoes, her mind replaying the encounter with Victor. Should she tell her grandmother? Before she could decide, the front door opened, and her mother entered still in her nursing scrubs and looking exhausted. "You're home early," Esther remarked, concern evident in her voice. Denise sighed heavily as she set down her purse. Hospitals on high alert, something about a large group of bikers spotted on the interstate heading this way. Administration's worried they might be coming to cause trouble after that incident last month with the motorcycle club member who died in the ER. Zaria's potato peeler clattered to the floor. Bikers. Victor had mentioned friends who would come get him. Had he been part of a motorcycle club, the partial skull patch suddenly seemed more ominous. "You all right, baby?" Denise asked, noting her daughter's reaction. "Just tired," Zaria lied, retrieving the peeler and washing it with shaking hands. Throughout dinner, conversation centered around the neighborhood's changes. Denise reported that the hospital administrator had mentioned exciting new developments coming to Westwood that would improve property values and attract a better element. "Better element," Esther repeated, her voice sharp, with decades of understanding exactly what such phrases meant. "My father heard the same words before they bulldozed his childhood home for that highway. Claimed it was for urban renewal, but somehow only the black neighborhoods needed renewing." As Esther recounted stories of historical discrimination faced by their family, Zaria's mind kept returning to Victor and his partially hidden patch. After dinner, she excused herself to do homework, but instead searched online for information about motorcycle clubs with skull insignias. The results made her stomach twist with anxiety. Several notorious groups used such imagery, including some with explicit white supremacist connections. The most prominent was the Hells Angels, known for their death's head logo, and a history of racial violence. Had she helped someone who belonged to such a group, the thought made her feel physically ill. What if Victor used her information to find their home? What if he brought others with him? She closed her laptop deeply, regretting her impulsive act of kindness. Sleep came fitfully that night, punctuated by nightmares of motorcycles surrounding their house, the riders all wearing jackets with grinning skulls. Morning brought no relief. At school, Zaria found herself distracted, jumping at loud noises and checking over her shoulder constantly. During lunch period, her distraction made her an easy target. Jason Whitaker and his friends cornered her in the cafeteria, knocking her tray from her hands. "Oops, sorry," Jason said with exaggerated insincerity. "Didn't see you there. Kind of like how your dad didn't see those security cameras when he was robbing that store." His friends laughed as Zaria knelt to clean the spilled food. "Leave me alone," she muttered, trying to gather her dignity along with the scattered lunch. "What was that?" Jason leaned closer. "You talking back. Maybe that's why your kind always end up in trouble. Don't know when to keep quiet." One of his friends added, "My dad says they're finally cleaning up your neighborhood. About time they got rid of the garbage." Mrs. Pembroke, the lunch monitor, had been watching the entire interaction but only approached after the food was already on the floor. "Let's not have any disruptions," she said mildly, addressing no one in particular before walking away without addressing the racial slur or the bullying. Later that day, Zaria reported the incident to her guidance counselor, Mrs. Winters, who sighed and folded her hands on her desk. "Zaria, you need to understand that not everything is about race. I'm sure Jason didn't mean anything by it. Sometimes you kids can be too sensitive about these things." The dismissal stung worse than the original insult. Returning home, Zaria found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, an official-looking letter in her hands and tears in her eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" Denise looked up quickly, wiping her face. "Nothing for you to worry about, baby." But the letter told a different story. Zaria caught enough words to understand termination of lease property redevelopment, 60 days notice. They were being evicted. Later that evening, Zaria overheard her mother and grandmother discussing a community meeting about neighborhood improvement that they hadn't been invited to attend. Several white families who had recently moved into the area had been sent personal invitations, while longtime black residents learned about it only through word of mouth too late to arrange attendance. As she lay in bed that night, Zaria was consumed with guilt. Had her interaction with Victor somehow contributed to the troubles befalling her family and community, it seemed far-fetched, yet the timing felt too coincidental. She clutched her pillow tightly, wishing she could take back those few minutes at the abandoned gas station and the 37 cents that might now cost her family everything. Do you believe Zaria was right to help Victor despite all the warnings she received? Comment number 1, if you think her compassion was justified, or number 2, if you believe she should have listened to her family's warnings about strangers. Like this video if you've ever faced a situation where doing the right thing felt risky. Subscribe to follow Zaria's journey and discover what happens when those 1,000 motorcycles arrive at her doorstep. The situation seems to be escalating quickly, but here's the question. When prejudice runs deep on both sides, can unexpected connections break through those barriers? Let's continue to find out. The next morning, Zaria noticed increased police presence in her neighborhood. 2 patrol cars idled at the corner of her street, officers watching residents with suspicious eyes. On her walk to school, she witnessed a disturbing scene that made her freeze in her tracks. Mr. Washington's 17-year-old son Jamal was pressed against a police cruiser, hands behind his back, as an officer patted him down roughly. "I'm just walking to school." Jamal protested, his backpack contents scattered across the sidewalk. "You fit the description of a suspicious person in the area," the officer responded, checking Jamal's ID despite clearly knowing who he was. Zaria had known Jamal her entire life. He was an honor student with a scholarship to Michigan State waiting for him next fall. He volunteered at the community center teaching younger kids to code. Yet here he was, being treated like a criminal for walking down the street he'd grown up on. As Zaria watched, a white woman about her mother's age walked by on the opposite sidewalk, giving the scene a wide berth. No officer asked for her ID or questioned her destination. The disparity wasn't lost on Zaria. After the officers finally let Jamal continue on his way, she hurried to catch up with him. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Jamal adjusted his backpack, his expression carefully controlled. "Third time this week," he said simply. "Mom wants me to start recording every time I leave the house, but they get more aggressive if they see a phone." At school, new security measures had been implemented overnight. Metal detectors stood at the entrance and security guards performed random bag checks. Zaria quickly noticed a pattern. While white students walked through with minimal screening, black and brown students were consistently pulled aside for more thorough searches. When she reached the detector, a guard motioned her to the side. "Backpack check," he said flatly. She watched as Emily Whitman, a white classmate, walked through without being stopped, despite carrying a backpack identical to Zaria's. "Why aren't you checking everyone?" Zaria asked before she could stop herself. The guard frowned. "Just doing my job, kid. Don't make trouble." By lunchtime, rumors were circulating about why security had suddenly increased. "My dad says there's a gang coming to the area," one student whispered loudly enough for Zaria to hear. "He says they're connected to the drug dealers in Westwood." The implication was clear: the connection between her neighborhood and criminal activity presented as established fact. That afternoon, Zaria's mother came home even more exhausted than usual, collapsing into a kitchen chair as Esther poured her a cup of tea. "What happened?" Esther asked, noting Denise's defeated posture. Denise rubbed her temples before answering. "Got assigned a new patient today. White man came in for heart palpitations. One look at me, and he demanded a different nurse. Said he didn't want colored hands touching him. The slur hung in the air like poison." "What did your supervisor say?" Esther asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Said it wasn't worth fighting about and assigned me elsewhere. When I pointed out the policy against accommodating discriminatory requests, she said now wasn't the time to make issues with administration changes coming." Zaria stayed quiet, adding this new injury to the growing list of injustices surrounding her. After dinner, her grandmother announced she was attending an emergency community meeting at New Hope Baptist Church to discuss the recent eviction notices. "You two stay home," she instructed. "They're saying there might be trouble with these bikers people are talking about." The mention of bikers sent a fresh wave of guilt through Zaria. Had her encounter with Victor somehow triggered this? As her grandmother prepared to leave, Zaria almost confessed, but fear kept the words trapped inside. While her mother caught up on paperwork at the kitchen table, Zaria watched from the window as Esther walked down the street to meet Mrs. Townsend from next door. Just as they reached the corner, a motorcycle slowly cruised past. The rider, a large figure in a black leather jacket, seemed to be scanning the houses. Zaria's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized Victor's distinctive beard. He was in their neighborhood, looking for her. She pulled the curtain closed with trembling hands and backed away from the window. Should she tell her mother? What could they do? They couldn't afford to go anywhere else, not with the eviction looming. As she debated her options, a news alert chimed on her mother's phone. Denise picked it up, her expression growing more concerned as she read. "They're saying a large group of motorcyclists has been spotted at the edge of the city," she informed Zaria. "Police are advising residents to stay indoors tomorrow if possible." Zaria couldn't contain her anxiety any longer. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "what if they're coming here, to our neighborhood?" Denise looked up, surprised by the fear in her daughter's voice. "Why would you think that, baby?" Before Zaria could answer, another motorcycle engine rumbled past their house, then another. Denise moved to the window and peered out cautiously. "There are 3 bikes going slow down the street," she reported, tension evident in her voice. "They're looking at houses, looking like they're searching for something." Or someone, Zaria thought, cold dread spreading through her body. When Esther returned from the meeting an hour later, her expression was grim. "Community's on edge," she reported. "Pastor Johnson says the police chief told him they're tracking a motorcycle club headed this way. Supposedly they have business in Westwood." She fixed Zaria with a penetrating look. "You've been jumpy since yesterday. Something you need to tell us." Under her grandmother's knowing gaze, Zaria's resolve crumbled. Through tears, she confessed the entire encounter with Victor, the coin collection she'd given him, and her fears about what she'd unintentionally set in motion. Rather than the anger she expected, Esther pulled her into a tight embrace. "Oh, child, your heart was in the right place, even if your head wasn't." Denise joined them, her expression worried but not accusatory. "We need to contact the police," she decided, reaching for her phone. "Let them know what happened." Zaria caught her wrist. "But what if they think I did something wrong? What if they don't believe me?" The questions reflected fears well-founded in their experiences with authority. After a family discussion, they decided that Denise would call Officer Taylor, a black woman, who had previously helped when their garage was broken into. She was one of the few officers they somewhat trusted. The call was brief but unsettling. Officer Taylor promised to document the information but warned that the police were already on high alert about the biker situation. "Stay inside tomorrow," she advised. "We're hearing reports of up to 100 motorcycles moving this way." Later that night, as Zaria prepared for bed, she glanced out her window and froze. Victor stood under a streetlight across from their house, looking directly at her window. Their eyes met for one terrifying moment before Zaria dropped to the floor, heart pounding. By the time she gathered the courage to peek out again, he was gone. But a small object gleamed on their front porch step under the porch light. Despite her fear, curiosity pulled her downstairs. Opening the door just enough to reach out, she retrieved a small envelope. Inside was a $100 bill and a handwritten note, "Just the beginning. Tomorrow." Morning arrived with an oppressive tension hanging over the Jackson household. Denise had called the hospital to report she couldn't come in due to the situation, only to learn that many staff had done the same. The $100 bill and cryptic note lay on the kitchen table where they'd placed it after a sleepless night of discussion. "I'm calling Officer Taylor again," Denise decided, reaching for her phone. The conversation was brief and unsatisfying. "Mrs. Jackson, we're receiving similar reports." Throughout Westwood, Officer Taylor explained, her voice professionally detached. "We don't have the resources to investigate every supposed threat right now." When Denise pressed about the note and money, a different voice came on the line. Officer Brennan, a white man whose reputation in the community was less than stellar, took over the call. "Sounds to me like you're upset about getting $100, he said, sarcasm evident. "Maybe you attracted this attention somehow. These gangs don't just pick random houses." The implication that their family must have done something to deserve targeting was clear, and Denise ended the call without further discussion. Zaria's school had announced closure via an emergency text alert, citing security concerns regarding potential outside disturbances. The vague wording did nothing to alleviate anxiety. By mid-morning, their street had transformed. Police barricades appeared at both ends, officers checking IDs of anyone trying to enter. News vans set up nearby, reporters doing live broadcasts about potential gang activity and criminal elements threatening a neighborhood in transition. Zaria watched from the window as their white neighbors were escorted to their vehicles by police officers allowed to leave the area for safety. When Mrs. Townsend next door attempted to do the same, she was turned back. "Stay in your home for your own protection," an officer told her firmly. "We can't guarantee your safety outside the perimeter." By noon, social media was flooded with conflicting information. Some reports claimed a motorcycle gang was planning a drug operation takeover. Others suggested it was retaliation against police for a recent arrest. None mentioned Victor or a daughter having a baby. "They're creating a narrative," Esther observed grimly as she scrolled through her phone. "Making sure everyone sees us as the problem, not the solution." A small group of protesters had gathered near the police barricade, holding signs that read, "Selective protection is oppression and safety for all residents." They were kept far from news cameras by police lines. As the afternoon progressed, Grandmother Esther's condition began to deteriorate. The stress had aggravated her hypertension, and her breathing became labored. "We need to get her medication," Denise worried, checking the nearly empty pill bottle. The pharmacy delivery was scheduled for today. Zaria overheard her mother on the phone, trying to arrange an emergency delivery, only to be told that no couriers would enter the neighborhood due to the ongoing situation. When Denise attempted to leave to get the medication herself, officers at the barricade refused to let her pass. "It's for my mother's heart condition," she pleaded. "It's not safe out there, ma'am," the officer responded without meeting her eyes. "We have credible information about imminent threats." As Denise argued with the officers, Zaria slipped away to the side of the house where she could hear their conversation more clearly. "We're making examples today," one officer said quietly to another when they thought no one was listening. "Chief says this neighborhood's been a problem long enough. After today, property values are going to drop so low developers can buy it all for pennies." The casual conspiracy in his tone made Zaria's blood run cold. This wasn't about protection. It was about creating enough fear and disruption to force families like hers out. When she reported what she'd overheard to her mother, Denise's expression hardened with resolution. "Call everyone you can," she instructed Zaria. "Tell them what's happening and ask them to document everything. We need witnesses." Throughout the afternoon, neighbors began to gather at the Jackson home, which had become an impromptu community hub due to Denise's medical training and Esther's respected status. People brought what supplies and food they could share, some carrying baseball bats and other makeshift weapons for protection against the threat they'd been told was coming for them. Mrs. Townsend, a retired nurse, helped monitor Esther's condition while Mr. Washington set up his amateur radio equipment to maintain communication in case phone services were disrupted. "My cousin works at the Highway Patrol Office," he informed the group. "Says they've counted over 500 motorcycles heading this way. All types of people riding, not just who you'd expect." The information was met with grim determination rather than panic. If trouble was coming, they would face it together. As evening approached, the distant sound of engines grew steadily louder. Neighbors gathered on the Jacksons' front porch and yard, forming a protective community barrier. Children were sent to interior rooms for safety. Denise had transformed their living room into a makeshift medical station, preparing for potential injuries with her nursing supplies. Through the growing tension, Zaria found herself strangely calm. Whatever was coming, it had begun with her action, her choice, to help Victor. She would face the consequences, not hide from them. The first motorcycles appeared at the end of the street, just as the sun began to set, their headlights cutting through the gathering dusk like searching eyes. Police officers drew their weapons as the lead riders slowed to a stop before the barricade. There were dozens visible already, with the rumble of hundreds more approaching behind them. The confrontation that had been brewing all day was about to begin. The evening air vibrated with the collective rumble of motorcycle engines as more riders continued to arrive, forming an imposing line that stretched beyond what Zaria could see from her position on the porch. Police officers shouted orders at each other, their voices tight with tension as they established a defensive line. Squad cars positioned themselves to create a barrier, lights flashing and casting alternating red and blue patterns across the scene. News helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights sweeping across the growing crowd of bikers. The lead motorcycle approached the police line slowly, its rider a familiar figure that made Zaria's heart skip. Victor Harrington sat tall on his restored black bike, his gray beard and weathered face visible as he removed his helmet. Unlike yesterday, he wore no attempt to hide the patch on his jacket. It was clearly visible now, a stylized skull with wings that Zaria recognized from her research. Behind him rode a diverse group that defied Zaria's expectations. Men and women of various races and ages, all wearing similar leather jackets with patches, formed the front line of riders. "We want to speak with the Jackson family," Victor called out to the officers, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence that had fallen between engine revs. "Specifically, the little girl who helped me yesterday." Officer Brennan stepped forward, hand resting ostentatiously on his holstered weapon. "This neighborhood is under police protection. Turn around and leave immediately." Victor remained calm, making no aggressive moves. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to repay a kindness." His response was met with disbelief from the officers, whose postures remained defensive. Brennan's radio crackled with updates about more motorcycles arriving at other neighborhood entry points. The estimates now exceeded 800 riders, with more still joining the gathering. From her position, Zaria could see media vans setting up cameras, reporters broadcasting live with fearful expressions and sensationalist descriptions. "A gang invasion," one reporter called it, while another referred to territorial expansion of criminal elements. None had attempted to speak with the bikers themselves. Victor tried again, his patience evident, despite the hostile reception. "My name is Victor Harrington. Yesterday, a young girl named Zaria Jackson helped me when I was stranded. I'm president of the Steel Wheels Brotherhood, and we're here on a mission of gratitude." The name of the club wasn't familiar to Zaria from her research. As she watched in confusion, Victor continued addressing the police line. "Our club has reformed. We've renounced the racist past of our predecessors. Many of our members are former military healthcare workers and community advocates. We're here peacefully." Officer Brennan scoffed audibly. "Right, and I'm Santa Claus. Move along before we have to take action." The standoff intensified as more residents emerged from their homes, cautiously observing from porches and windows. Phones recorded the interaction from multiple angles, live streaming to social media, where the narrative was rapidly diverging from official reports. A sudden commotion from inside the house drew Zaria's attention. Denise, Mrs. Townsend, called urgently. "Esther's pressure is dropping." Zaria watched her mother rush inside, momentarily torn between family crisis and the unfolding situation outside. The decision was made for her when Officer Brennan spotted her on the porch. "Is that her?" he demanded, pointing directly at Zaria. "That the girl they're looking for?" Before anyone could respond, Brennan strode toward the Jackson house, pushing past neighbors who tried to block his path. "You," he addressed Zaria directly. "What involvement do you have with these criminals?" The accusatory tone and threatening approach triggered protective responses from the community. Mr. Washington stepped between the officer and Zaria. "She's 11 years old. Back off." Interfering with police business, Brennan challenged, hand moving to his weapon again. The confrontation might have escalated further if not for a distraction from the biker line. A woman had dismounted and was approaching the police barrier with hands clearly visible. She wore medical scrubs beneath her leather jacket. "I'm Dr. Rosario, emergency physician at Mercy Hospital," she announced. "We have medical personnel with us who can help if anyone needs assistance." Her offer hung in the air as Denise appeared in the doorway, desperation evident in her expression. "My mother needs emergency care. Her medication ran out, and they wouldn't let us through to get more. She's having a cardiac event." Dr. Rosario turned to Victor, who nodded immediately. Within moments, 5 riders wearing medical patches dismounted and collected equipment from saddlebags and compartments. Officer Brennan moved to block them. "This is an unauthorized medical intervention. No one crosses this line." Victor's patience visibly thinned. "You're preventing emergency medical care for an elderly woman. Is that the position you want to take publicly?" He gestured to the news cameras, capturing every moment of the standoff. As Brennan hesitated, caught between his orders and the optics of the situation, Chief Rivera's vehicle pulled up to the scene. The police chief emerged quickly, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. After a brief conversation with Victor and several officers, he made a decision. "Let the medical personnel through," he ordered. "Document everything but allow emergency care." As doctor. Rosario and her team rushed toward the Jackson house. Victor addressed the gathering crowd of residents and media. "Yesterday, Zaria Jackson gave me her entire coin collection so I could make a phone call when my motorcycle broke down. 37 cents that meant everything to her, but she gave it to help a stranger in need." His voice carried easily through the hushed attention of the crowd. "That call was to my daughter Alexandria, who was in labor with complications. The hospital was about to perform an emergency C-section, and she was asking for me. Thanks to Zaria, I made it there in time. Both my daughter and granddaughter survived a dangerous delivery." The story began to shift the atmosphere, confusion replacing hostility among some observers. Victor continued, "After leaving the hospital, I learned about this community's struggles. The discriminatory evictions, the selective police protection, the systematic dismantling of a neighborhood with generations of history." He looked directly at Zaria. "I couldn't stop thinking about how a little girl, who had every reason to fear someone like me, chose kindness instead. So I reached out to our network, and people responded." As if on cue, more motorcycles arrived, some pulling trailers laden with supplies. "We're not here to cause trouble," Victor stated firmly. "We're here because, when compassion crosses boundaries that hatred has established, something powerful happens." Chief Rivera had been conferring with officers while monitoring the situation. He approached Victor with cautious professionalism. "What exactly are your intentions here today, Mr. Harrington?" Victor's response was clear and direct. "We're here to provide immediate assistance to families facing eviction, offer legal support against discriminatory housing practices, and make sure the media covers what's really happening in this neighborhood instead of the narrative that's been constructed." Inside the house, Esther's condition was stabilizing under Dr. Rosario's care. The immediate crisis averted, attention returned to the unprecedented gathering outside. Community members began cautiously approaching the police line, recording interactions, and sharing their experiences of the day's events. The narrative was rapidly changing as first-hand accounts contradicted official statements. "Do you think Officer Brennan was justified in his aggressive response, or was he driven by prejudice?" Comment number 1. If you believe the police were right to be cautious about such a large gathering, or number 2, if you think their actions revealed systemic discrimination. Like this video if you believe that breaking down stereotypes requires courage from both sides. Subscribe to see how this extraordinary confrontation transforms a community in the face of injustice. The question remains, when authorities fail to protect everyone equally, who becomes responsible for justice? Let's continue Zaria's incredible story. The atmosphere on Maple Street transformed as Victor revealed the true purpose behind the massive gathering of bikers. Every rider here today brought something, he announced to the bewildered crowd of residents, police officers, and news crews. Some brought supplies, others legal expertise, others media connections. We represent over 30 different clubs from 12 states, all answering the call to support a community being systematically pushed out. As he spoke, riders began unloading supplies from saddlebags and trailers. Cases of water, non-perishable food, diapers, and medical supplies accumulated at the police barricade. Others distributed business cards indicating they were attorneys, specializing in housing discrimination, civil rights violations, and community advocacy. The sheer organization of the effort was staggering. Officer Brennan pushed through the crowd toward Chief Rivera, his face flushed with anger. "Sir, we need to disperse this unauthorized gathering immediately. They're clearly attempting to circumvent official channels." The chief's response was measured as he observed the situation. "Brennan, we have nearly 1,000 civilians engaged in what appears to be humanitarian aid. There's no legal justification for force here." Brennan lowered his voice, though Zaria, who had edged closer to listen, could still hear him. "These people are manipulating the situation. They're making us look like the bad guys." Perhaps Chief Rivera replied coolly, "Because your actions today have been questionable at best." Meanwhile, Victor had approached the Jackson home respectfully, waiting at the sidewalk, rather than entering their property uninvited. Denise emerged from the house, her nurse's training evident in her professional demeanor, despite the extraordinary circumstances. "My mother's stable now, thanks to your medical team," she acknowledged. "But I still don't understand why you've brought all these people to our neighborhood." Victor gestured for a woman to join him, a tall black rider whose leather vest identified her as Road Captain Steel Wheels Brotherhood. "This is Marlene Jenkins," Victor introduced. "Former military intelligence, current civil rights attorney. She can explain better than I can." Marlene stepped forward with a tablet in hand. "Mrs. Jackson, after Victor told us about your daughter's kindness, we did some research. What we found was disturbing. She displayed a series of documents on her tablet, property records showing the same development company buying buildings throughout Westwood at suspiciously low prices. Police report patterns showing increased citations and arrests in this neighborhood, coinciding with development interests. School board minutes approving redistricting that will effectively segregate students." The systematic nature of what was happening became clearer as Marlene continued. "This isn't random gentrification. It's a coordinated effort to devalue property through manufactured crime concerns, force out long-time residents, and rebuild for a different demographic." As this conversation occurred on the Jacksons' front walkway, the media that had arrived expecting to cover a gang confrontation found a much different story unfolding. Cameras that had been positioned to capture potential violence now recorded residents sharing stories of discrimination, alongside bikers distributing supplies and information. Victor explained his personal transformation to a cluster of reporters who had cautiously approached. The Steel Wheels Brotherhood was founded 5 years ago by former members of clubs with racist histories who wanted to create something better. Many of us grew up with prejudice we're still unlearning. "We're not perfect, but we're committed to standing against the kind of systemic injustice happening here." Inside the Jackson home, Dr. Rosario continued monitoring Esther while explaining the situation to her. "My husband rides with the Phoenix chapter," she told the elderly woman. When Victor put out the call about what was happening here, hundreds responded within hours. Many of us have seen the same pattern in our own cities. Esther, now sitting up and looking markedly improved, fixed the doctor with a penetrating gaze. "In my 82 years, I've seen all manner of white folks coming into black neighborhoods with big promises. What makes you different?" Dr. Rosario smiled at the direct question. "We're not promising to save you. We're just equalizing the resources for your community to save itself." Outside, the police barricade was gradually transforming from a barrier to a distribution point. Officers, uncertain how to respond to the peaceful assembly, began helping pass supplies to residents. Chief Rivera had established a command post where he monitored the situation while fielding increasingly concerned calls from city officials watching the live coverage. The narrative was slipping from their control with each passing minute. Zaria found herself at the center of attention as Victor formally introduced her to the gathered crowd. "This young woman taught me something yesterday that I'll never forget," he announced. "When she offered me her coins, she didn't see a scary white biker with a questionable past. She saw another human being in need." He reached into his jacket and withdrew the familiar cigar box. "I promised I'd return this," he said, presenting it to Zaria. When she opened it, she found not only her original 37 cents, including her father's special penny, but the box had been filled with rare coins from collectors throughout the biker network. "Your collection was the seed money for everything that's happening today," Victor explained. "We started with your 37 cents and raised over $200,000 in 24 hours for legal defense funds and emergency housing support for families facing eviction." The revelation stunned the onlookers. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had catalyzed something far beyond anyone's expectations. As the afternoon progressed, the event transformed into an impromptu community resource fair. Bikers with legal backgrounds helped residents document housing violations and prepare anti-discrimination complaints. Healthcare workers established a pop-up clinic, providing services many families had been unable to access. Mechanics repaired cars that residents relied on for work. The media coverage shifted dramatically from sensationalist gang invasion headlines to human interest stories about community resilience and unexpected alliances. By evening, when Officer Brennan attempted to enforce a curfew to clear the gathering, he found himself isolated in his aggressive stance. Multiple camera phones recorded his confrontation with a black female biker who identified herself as a retired police captain from Chicago. "The law doesn't support your order, officer," she stated calmly. "We're engaged in constitutionally protected assembly and mutual aid." When Brennan reached for his taser in response, Chief Rivera intervened, ordering him to stand down and report for administrative review. As darkness fell, portable lights illuminated the street where impromptu community meetings had formed. Representatives from national civil rights organizations had arrived, alerted by the viral spread of videos showing the day's events. What had begun as a feared confrontation had transformed into the foundation of a powerful alliance that neither the city officials nor the developers had anticipated. The morning sun rose over a transformed Maple Street. Overnight, the gathering had evolved from crisis response to organized community action. Tents now lined the road, creating stations for legal assistance, healthcare services, housing resources, and media operations. Residents who had barricaded themselves indoors just 24 hours earlier now moved freely among their unexpected allies, sharing stories and strategies. Grandmother Esther held court from a comfortable chair on the Jacksons' front porch, her health stabilized thanks to the medical team that had remained overnight. She directed volunteers with the authority of someone who had spent decades navigating systems designed to exclude her community. The Housing Authority office needs those discrimination forms by noon. She instructed a group of law student volunteers who had arrived at dawn. "And make sure everyone gets a copy of their submission for their own records." Denise emerged from the house with coffee for her mother and the volunteers, her nursing uniform replaced with casual clothes. Her phone rang constantly with calls from hospital colleagues offering support after seeing news coverage of the situation. The most surprising development had come just after midnight when Denise received a call from Detroit Memorial Hospital, the prestigious facility across town. "They offered me a nursing supervisor position," she told Victor and Marlene as they coordinated the day's activities. "Said they've been watching my work for years but couldn't reach me through proper channels because of administrative interference at General." The implications were clear. Her career advancement had been deliberately blocked by the same forces working to reshape the neighborhood. Zaria moved through the activity with a sense of wonder, watching as the community she'd known her entire life transformed from isolated households into a united force. The medical evacuation for her grandmother the previous evening had become a turning point in the standoff. When Officer Brennan had attempted to prevent the helicopter landing on the school field, multiple recordings of his threats and racial comments had gone viral. The resulting public outcry forced the department to place him on administrative leave pending investigation. Chief Rivera, recognizing the shifting dynamics, had pivoted to a community support role, reassigning officers who showed bias and bringing in those with community policing experience. By mid-morning, Victor gathered everyone for an important announcement. Standing on a makeshift platform, he addressed the crowd that now included residents, bikers, media, and even some police officers. "Yesterday I told you we raised $200,000 to support this community. Today, I'm pleased to announce that number has reached 1 million and is still climbing. The cheers that erupted were deafening. People across the country are watching what's happening here in Westwood. They're seeing how a community refuses to be erased and how unlikely allies can come together against injustice. He gestured to a group of formally dressed individuals standing nearby. These attorneys have filed emergency injunctions against all pending evictions in this neighborhood, citing clear evidence of discriminatory practices. Marlene stepped forward to elaborate. We've documented a pattern of selective code enforcement, discriminatory lending practices, and coordinated harassment designed to force residents out. The developers didn't count on having this level of legal firepower fighting back. While she spoke, a convoy of vehicles arrived at the edge of the gathering. City officials, including the mayor and several council members, exited under the scrutiny of dozens of cameras. They had refused to comment on the situation until now, when the national attention made continued silence politically untenable. The mayor approached with a plastered smile trailed by nervous aides. "We're here to listen to community concerns and work toward a peaceful resolution," he announced to the media before reaching Victor. Behind the scenes, the day brought revelation after revelation. Records obtained through emergency legal discovery showed the property management company behind the evictions was a subsidiary of a development corporation owned primarily by the same investors who controlled the school board and funded the campaigns of key city officials. Evidence emerged of Officer Brennan receiving payments to increase arrests and citations in targeted areas, creating artificial crime statistics to justify increased police presence and decreased property values. Most shocking to Zaria was learning that the principal of her school, Mr. Whitaker, had a significant financial stake in the development company. His constant targeting of certain students suddenly made perfect sense as part of a larger strategy to paint the community in the worst possible light. By afternoon, national civil rights leaders had arrived, bringing additional media attention and political pressure. What had begun as a local struggle was rapidly becoming a symbol of resistance against displacement and discrimination nationwide. The hospital administration where Denise worked released a carefully worded statement about reviewing all personnel practices after documents revealed systematic blocking of advancement opportunities for minority staff. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, a special moment occurred when Victor introduced Zaria to a young woman holding a baby. "Zaria Jackson, this is my daughter Alexandria and my granddaughter Hope. They wouldn't be here without you." Alexandria, still showing signs of her difficult delivery, embraced Zaria with her free arm. "My father told me what you did. The doctor said if he hadn't arrived when he did." She trailed off, emotions overwhelming her. "I named her Hope because that's what your kindness gave us." As the day progressed, residents from surrounding neighborhoods began arriving with additional supplies and support. What had been contained to Maple Street now expanded throughout Westwood as similar stories of discrimination and displacement emerged. The legal team documented each case, building a class-action lawsuit that would eventually force a complete restructuring of the city's housing and development policies. By evening, the mayor, under intense scrutiny and facing questions about his own connections to the development schemes, announced the creation of an independent commission to investigate all aspects of the situation. His carefully worded statement avoided admitting wrongdoing while attempting to position the city as responsive to community concerns. No one was fooled by the political maneuvering, but the official acknowledgement represented a significant victory nonetheless. As night fell on the second day of the gathering, Zaria sat on her front steps, watching the transformation around her. Neighbors who had barely spoken for years now coordinated meal distributions together. Children played safely under the watchful eyes of a community that had discovered its collective power. And throughout it all, the steady presence of leather-clad allies from across the country provided a protective barrier that neither official intimidation nor corporate pressure could penetrate. Something fundamental had changed, not just in the external circumstances, but in how the community viewed itself. The isolation that had made them vulnerable had been replaced by connections that made them strong. And it had all begun with 37 cents and a choice to see humanity where others saw only difference. 6 months later, Zaria stood before a crowd gathered in the newly established Westwood Community Center, formerly the abandoned Sunoco station where she had first met Victor. The transformation of the space mirrored the broader changes throughout the neighborhood. Fresh paint community murals and flourishing garden boxes had replaced cracked concrete and graffiti. Inside, computer stations, meeting rooms, and a health clinic served residents who had fought successfully to remain in their homes. Thank you all for coming to our community celebration. Zaria began, her voice stronger and more confident than the shy 11-year-old of half a year ago. 6 months ago, I made a small choice that I thought would help one person. I never imagined what would happen next. The audience, a diverse mixture of neighborhood residents, Steel Wheels Brotherhood members, legal advocates, and media representatives, applauded as Zaria continued her address. The months following what locals now called the Gathering had brought extraordinary changes to Westwood and beyond. The class action lawsuit filed by the bikers-sponsored legal team had resulted in a landmark settlement against the Development Corporation and its municipal enablers. Discriminatory evictions were invalidated with substantial compensation awarded to affected families. The investigation into corrupt practices had extended to the police department, school administration, and city hall, resulting in numerous resignations and criminal charges. Officer Brennan faced prosecution for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and corruption. The principal, Mr. Persenin, Paberke. Whitaker had been removed after documentation proved he had deliberately targeted students of color for disciplinary action to manipulate school performance statistics and justify closure. But the most significant victory had come just 1 week ago. As many of you know, Zaria continued, her voice wavering slightly with emotion. The Innocence Project attorneys, funded by the Steel Wheels Brotherhood Legal Foundation, successfully argued for my father's case to be reopened. She paused, gathering herself. The evidence they uncovered proved what we always knew. He was framed by corrupt officers working to increase conviction rates in our neighborhood. The crowd erupted in cheers as Marcus Jackson stepped forward to stand beside his daughter. Released after 3 years of wrongful imprisonment, he still showed the physical effects of his incarceration, but his eyes shone with pride as he embraced Zaria. The investigation had revealed a systematic pattern of false arrests and planted evidence targeting black men in gentrifying areas, creating artificial crime statistics that further depressed property values while removing fathers from NEHA, their families. Marcus wasn't the only one receiving justice. 17 other wrongfully convicted men from the neighborhood had their cases reopened, with 7 already released and others scheduled for new hearings. Victor approached the podium next, his imposing physical presence now a source of comfort rather than fear to the community. When I founded the Steel Wheels Brotherhood 5 years ago, it was because I believed people could change, that we could acknowledge our past mistakes and work towards something better. He surveyed the audience before continuing. What happened here in Westwood has transformed not just this community, but our organization as well. Chapters have now been established in 62 cities, all committed to identifying and combating housing discrimination and police misconduct. The partnership between the Reformed Motorcycle Club and the neighborhood had evolved into a nationwide network of community defense initiatives. Riders provided physical security for residents facing intimidation, while their diverse membership, including attorneys, healthcare workers, and tradespeople, contributed professional skills to communities traditionally denied access to such resources. Denise Jackson, now nursing director at Detroit Memorial Hospital, had established a healthcare apprenticeship program that created career pathways for neighborhood youth. Grandmother Esther chaired the newly formed Community Oversight Board with authority to review police activities and development proposals affecting Westwood. The settlement funds had enabled many families to purchase their previously rented homes, securing their place in the neighborhood permanently. A community land trust had been established to maintain affordability for future generations. As the celebration continued, Zaria revealed the contents of a large display case near the entrance. "This is my new coin collection," she explained to visitors. Every motorcycle club that participated in the gathering sent special coins from their regions. The impressive display included rare and commemorative pieces from across the country. But in the center, in a special holder, sat the original steel penny her father had given her, now returned to its rightful place. Alexandria approached with baby Hope, now a chubby 6-month-old with curious eyes. "She's starting her own collection too," Alexandria told Zaria with a smile, showing a small bracelet with a coin charm. "So she never forgets the girl who saved her life." As evening approached, Victor requested a moment to make a final announcement. The crowd quieted as he took the podium, unusually solemn. "There's something I haven't shared before, something I believe it's time for everyone to know." He looked directly at Marcus Jackson before continuing. 25 years ago, I was a rookie police officer in this very precinct. The revelation sent murmurs through the audience. I left the force after testifying against fellow officers who were planting evidence. My testimony was buried, I was labeled a traitor, and I was threatened into silence. He paused, emotion evident in his weathered face. One of those cases involved a young man named Terrence Washington, who was Denise Jackson's brother. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd as connections were made. After being forced out of the department, I found community among bikers, eventually falling into the same prejudices I'd once opposed. It took years to find my way back, to recognize what I'd become. Victor turned to face Marcus directly. "The same corrupt system that framed you was already in operation when I failed to stand strong against it. Your wrongful conviction is part of my failure, and for that I am deeply sorry." The moment of vulnerability from the imposing biker president created a profound silence. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand to Victor. "We've all been caught in the same chains, just different links," he said as they shook hands. "What matters is that we're breaking them now." The symbolism of their handshake, captured by dozens of cameras, would become an iconic image in the ongoing national conversation about racial justice and community empowerment. As the formal program concluded, Zaria performed one final official duty. Leading everyone outside, she unveiled a simple bronze plaque beside the community center's entrance. It read, "Small change, where 37 cents transformed a community. Founded in honor of all who choose to see humanity before difference." In the gathering dusk, hundreds of motorcycles lined the street in a protective formation that had become familiar and welcome. What had once been seen as a threat had become a symbol of unexpected alliance and mutual respect. Families who had lived as isolated units fighting individual battles now moved through the celebration as a cohesive community with shared purpose and collective power. The transformation went beyond physical improvements or legal victories. Something fundamental had shifted in how people related to each other and understood their own agency. Zaria watched as her father, still adjusting to freedom, engaged in conversation with bikers and neighbors alike. Her mother laughed with hospital colleagues who had joined the celebration. Her grandmother held court with community elders and young activists, equally devoted to her wisdom. And throughout it all, children played freely, unburdened by the fear that had previously defined their neighborhood experience. Victor approached Zaria as she observed the scene. "You know what I've learned from all this?" he asked quietly. "That the smallest actions often break the biggest chains. Your 37 cents did more than my 20 years of trying to make amends." Zaria smiled, understanding now what her father had meant about her special penny. "It wasn't the money," she replied. "It was seeing each other when everyone else looked away." As night fell completely, the community gathering showed no signs of diminishing. The connections forged through crisis had evolved into lasting bonds of mutual support and respect. The developers' attempts to erase a community had instead revealed its strength. The system's efforts to isolate people from each other had instead united them across divisions previously thought unbridgeable. And it had begun with a simple choice made by a child who offered kindness when suspicion would have been easier. Have you ever experienced a moment where an unexpected connection changed your perspective? Has someone from a completely different background ever surprised you with kindness or understanding? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that even the smallest actions can create powerful change. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey, and remember that in a world that often tries to divide us the most revolutionary act may be simply seeing the humanity in one another. This story reveals profound truths about human connection in a divided world. When Zaria offered her coins to Victor, she demonstrated that compassion can transcend deeply ingrained fears and prejudices. Her small act sparked a transformation that neither could have imagined. The narrative reminds us that systemic injustice thrives on isolation, keeping communities separate, suspicious, and therefore vulnerable. By creating unexpected alliances across racial, cultural, and social, divides people discover collective power that can challenge entrenched discrimination. The reformed bikers, once part of organizations with racist histories, found redemption through confronting their past mistakes and actively working toward justice. Meanwhile, the community discovered that their greatest strength wasn't in individual resistance, but in united purpose. The story challenges us to recognize how prejudice operates on multiple levels, from personal interactions to institutional systems designed to marginalize certain populations. It shows that genuine change requires both addressing individual bias and dismantling structural inequalities. Most importantly, it illustrates that transformation often begins with the smallest choices: a child seeing humanity where others saw threat, a former officer acknowledging past wrongs, neighbors supporting each other despite fear. These seemingly minor actions can break chains that have bound communities for generations. Has someone from an unexpected background ever changed your perspective or helped you when others turned away? Or have you ever offered kindness to someone society taught you to fear? Share your experience in the comments below. We all have moments where crossing boundaries creates powerful connections. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of courage and compassion across America's deepest divides. And if you know someone struggling to believe that small actions matter or that people can change, share this video with them as a reminder that even in our most divided communities, human connection can transform everything. Thank you for witnessing Zaria's journey from fear to understanding, from 37 cents to lasting change. Remember, in a world that profits from our division, choosing to see each other's humanity is the most revolutionary act of all.